My name is Rachel Bloomerth, and I am one of the co-chairs of the Jeffreys Point Neighborhood Association. Margaret, the other co-chair, and Andrew, the treasurer, are unable to be with us tonight, but I will let the rest of the board introduce themselves. Go ahead, Susan.
Hi, I'm Susan Huang. I am the vice chair.
And I'm Mary Cole. I'm the secretary.
Just looking to see, we do have a planning and zoning subcommittee. Just seeing if anyone from the subcommittee is with us tonight. Casey Sylvia is here from the subcommittee. Casey, if you want to say hi.
And I see Kathy Mangini.
Oh, yes, and Kathy Mangini is here too. We're just going to identify, we have several people on the phone that I would like to get attendance information from. So if the last four digits are 7570, can you let us know who you are?
Yes, I'm Marie Pepe Long, and I live at 221 Everett Street.
Awesome. Hi, Marie.
Hi.
We also have someone last number 0153.
Ann Belmonte.
Oh, Ann Belmonte. Thank you.
221 Everett Street, apartment 2.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And just as a reminder, tonight, only people who have registered for the meeting 24 hours in advance that are abutters of the project, meaning within 300 feet of the project, will be able to speak out loud. You'll be able to raise your hand and I will call on you to unmute. If not, everything else can go through the chat. You can put questions through the chat throughout the presentation, so don't feel like you need to wait until the very end. And just a couple announcements that the May monthly meeting will be held on Monday, May 9th. We're looking forward to presentations from Tailwind Airlines and the East Boston Shipyard and Marina. And if you would like to learn more about what is going on in Jeffreys Point, you can sign up for the East Boston newsletter. I'm going to put that link in the chat of where to sign up.
And I see we have Natalia Benitez on the line.
I'm here. Hello, everyone.
Hi.
A
Hi,
pleasure as always.
Natalia is our lovely ONS, Office of Neighborhood Service rep, and she is joining us, so thank you.
And that is her newsletter we were advertising. She does a great job.
Thank you.
Okay, just a reminder to mute yourself as you come in. And I think we are just about ready to start. We're going to start with 230 Everett, and I believe Mark Savatsky, our old P&Z subcommittee member, is going to be presenting this one. So take it away, Mark.
This is
Thank you so much. It's great to be back.
Okay, so this is just down the street from us.
Sorry, guys. 1 second. I'm muting.
We'll come right back to you.
Okay. Now go ahead, Mark.
Sure. My only question is, I emailed this a week ago. Since then, we just made one change, which is that we flipped the driveway back. And so I have an updated presentation if you want me to share my screen. If not, I can just explain it when we get to that one.
Yeah, why don't you just explain it and then you can send me the updated presentation and I'll make sure to upload it with the minutes and on the website.
Okay, awesome. I'm sorry about that.
Oh, no problem.
I know I'm standing between us and a Celtics playoff game here, so I will try to be quick, but it's great to see a lot of friends and familiar faces. My name's Mark Savatsky, and I'm here on behalf of the development team for 230 Everett Street. With me tonight is Chris Prudhomme from Zephyr Architects, and also Karina Meha, who is the developer on this project as well. If you go to the next slide, I think we'll just go through some quick topics here. We'll start with just a zoning review of the project. We'll talk high level about what the building is and what we're proposing for the site. Get into a little bit of a solar study where we've met with a number of abutters now and neighbors, and we've really enjoyed those conversations. And I think one thing we've been pretty successful in getting across is that we're here in good faith. We're really trying to listen and respond to you know, we may not agree on everything, but we're trying to figure out where we can give. And if we do disagree agreeably, to use an Obama-ism. So we appreciate that. And then after we look through the shadow studies, we'll talk about materiality, facade, the overall design concept, and we'll open it up for discussion. So next slide, please. Locus map, in case you don't know where 230 Everett Street is, these three rings represent the buffers, the first one being our 300-foot radius, and then the last one furthest out, 1/4 mile. But Everett Street on the left, heading towards Jeffries. Next slide, please. As proposed, this will be a 4-story, 5-unit building, which will provide 6 off-street parking spaces. This is a departure from where we were last in front of the JPNA. We previously had a 7-unit building. We had 7 off-street parking spaces, and the building was right up against the back of the curb. What we heard was that there was a desire for some additional green space, some planting areas to match the alignment of the buildings to our left, and to provide a little more sensitivity to that 4th story. So we've pulled that 4th story back as far as we could. And then we changed the railings on that outdoor space on the 4th floor to glass to allow just a little more transparency. So it's really not perceptible as a pedestrian might experience it from the opposite side of Everett Street. Finally, in response to some concerns from some immediate abutters as well, we have deleted the roof decks. This was a last minute decision amongst the development group, but you know, something that we're happy to make an adjustment for. And I think we have a lot of great open space despite the roof deck. So next slide, please. We'll start with the zoning. This isn't glamorous, but it's important. So we have a lot which is 45 feet by 100. In many senses, this is approximately 2 typical lots down Everett Street. You know, zoning would ask that a minimum lot width be 20 feet wide, and here again we have 45. So we're in compliance on the lot width. The use as we go to 5 units is a multifamily residential use. So that would be a variance. Similarly, on lot size, there's a specification for how much lot area per dwelling unit, and that would also trigger a variance. Moving along, the 4th story does put us over on height and number of stories, as I just mentioned. Our FAR is below 2. That was something that we discussed very specifically with Zephyr, our architects, at the outset here. And I think 1.78 is very much in keeping with the density up and down Everett Street. And so that number was not just a happy accident there. That's something that we really tried to design to, was below 2. And continuing on, minimal usable open space. This is one where I regret to say getting rid of those roof decks did trigger the open space, whereas they require 300 square feet per dwelling unit. We fall slightly below that now. But each unit does have open space. We have common planting areas in the front and the rear, which we'll get to. And finally, rounding this out, our front yard complies now that we've pulled that back, and then the side yard and the rear yard would also trigger. And 6 parking spaces, though we have more than 1-to-1, would not be the 1.75 per dwelling unit. Next slide, please. Walk you through just the orientation of the building, the design. I think really highly of Chris and Zephyr. I think they really put together a really nice detailed building that flows, that works. There's a lot of small things here that I'll try to point out if I can use view options and annotate. So first, we mentioned there's 6 parking spots, but what I like about this is that we introduced the rear door here. This was a later iteration. Our concern is that folks may park in the back of the building and then have to walk all the way down the driveway into the front, which may later cause folks to instead, as much as we want them to be good neighbors and consider, you know, park vehicles on the street and take from the available supply of street spots. So that back door was added. That hallway took a little bit from our 1st floor unit, but I think it's a really great addition because I think it makes that back parking area a little more viable and attractive for the building occupants. I'm going to stop here as well and just call attention to what I started our presentation with, which was the notion that there is a fire hydrant. It's over here. It was very astutely pointed out to us on our last O&S meeting. We flipped the driveway because our civil engineer suggested it may make for a slightly easier grading plan in the end, the way that the contours of the site exist. It's not a big deal. After we learned of the fire hydrant and we studied this with our transportation engineers as far as its impact on parking, we said, forget about it. We flipped the driveway back to where you were accustomed to seeing it. We're going to keep the curb cut exactly where it is. So the parking on street as current is how the parking will be once this building is complete. There will be no impact, and we appreciate that comment and certainly hear you loud and clear on that. So I can share that updated rendering, which essentially just mirrors this building back. Very simple architectural change, but trust that that change has been made. Unit 1 is a handicap accessible unit. This would be our ADA roll-in unit. So folks can enter off the street into this common hallway again, and Unit 1 would sort of enter right here into their unit. This is a 1-bedroom unit, fairly modest in size. And as we move up the building, this common staircase would feed to the 2nd floor, where we have Unit 2 and 3, Unit 2 favoring the front, Unit 3 favoring the rear. Call attention here to, again, this is the this sort of inset balcony, what our realtor has been calling a winter garden, which I still don't know what that is. But that offers some nice outdoor space. We think it activates the street really nicely too. I think it's a nice thing when you're coming down the street and you can kind of see your neighbors, sit out there with a cup of coffee or a newspaper. Similarly, the deck off the rear for Unit 3, this is by no means a party deck. It's 5 feet by 12 feet, nice enough for a table for 2 and maybe an umbrella, but a good place to catch some fresh air. Next slide, please. As we get to Units 4 and 5, you'll notice these are duplex levels. These are bi-level condominiums, which is something that I'll pause and just emphasize. These are for home ownership. These will be condominiums and not apartments. And as for sale product, there's a few things that the development group has taken into consideration, and I'll just point out quickly. One is a professional management group. I think when you have a 2-unit or a 3-unit building, you can self-manage. At 5 units, you start to get a lot of, I'm not doing it if he didn't do it, and he never took the trash in, so I'm not going to do it. So for that reason, we work with a group called Urban Management, and they'll be responsible for janitorial services, for trash, taking the trash out, pulling the trash back in, snow removal in the winter, and also upkeep of the planting areas in the front and in the back. So again, going back to just the unit floor plans, open concept, living, dining, kitchen on this 3rd floor. There is 1 bedroom on this level. We think it may be used as a home office, but these are nice because they offer 3 bedrooms as you go up to that reduced step back 4th story. You get 2 additional bedrooms. And so, our hope is that they're suitable for families and folks who may want to, stay in the neighborhood more long-term. That's something that we also know is important. And so we're happy to offer these 3-bed units. Highlighted here is that outdoor space with the glass railing, which you'll see shortly. And off the rear is another deck for Unit 5, given that there's no longer a roof deck. Next slide, please. Solar study. This study to the right here was done by Zephyr, and I appreciate the detail and thoroughness of these studies. I don't always follow them precisely. This is a $10 app that I take from my iPhone, which I really actually use every time I look at a property. And I think it tells the story very nicely of where the sun starts at 7 a.m. and where it wraps around at sunset at 6 p.m. And it kind of gives you an idea of where a building may or may not cast shadows. Excuse me. And looking at this in more detailed fashion, I think what's really important to note is that this building has very de minimis impact on shadows to our adjacent structures to the left or to the right, especially after 10 a.m. There's a very marginal reduction in those really early morning hours, but as the sun moves on, impact on shadows is again fairly negligible. Next slide, please. This is our first rendering. This is an updated rendering, rather. And I'll point out again, the curb cut has been mirrored. So the driveway would be on the right in this photo. I think it's important just to point out the materiality and really the quality of the design here. I think what we've seen a lot of is fairly uninspired designs. And, I know that beauty is in the eye of the beholder, and some may not appreciate the more transitional nature of this design. I happen to really think it's handsome. We use a sembrate panel instead of your typical hardy plank planks. So these sort of offer a little bit of additional detail. We introduced this product would be a Nichiha. It's also there to resemble cedar, perhaps a little bit more durable. And that theme carries through sort of cohesively through the design up to the penthouse. We introduced the brick at the ground level because we think that that's a very strong base or an anchor to the building. And it's a really resilient and durable base, especially in an area that we're trying to build with an eye towards the future and perhaps flood considerations and things like that. With that, I'd like to add that there's no basement in this building. That's something which I may not have said explicitly, but may be obvious from our floor plans. We're really working hard to hold everything up above the base flood elevation in this area. All of our critical infrastructure, be it our heat pumps, our electrical panels, all that gear would be up elevated off of the street and centrally located on the roof. So it's not visible to view, and it's also not prone to any future climate change concerns. Next slide, please. This next rendering is to give some context of the building on the block. One thing that I've pointed out before is just the eclectic nature, if you will, of the houses up and down Everett Street. I think there's a pretty strong argument that a building on Webster Street maybe wants to be brick, a lot of brick bow front buildings. Whereas here we have some gable roofs, we have flat roofs, some perhaps a little more tenement style, old 3 families. So there really isn't one cohesive singular architectural style. And Joy Street Design did a really cool building, a little bit more modern than this, about 6 houses down. And so we think this will be a great addition to the block and to the neighborhood. Next slide, please. Groundwater management. Again, this goes back to the idea of coastal flooding resiliency and climate change. And so we have a planting area in the rear. We did lose 1 parking spot on account of that. We think that's our civil engineer is happy to have that. It's likely where we'll have about 3 of these chambers. These chambers will be filled with clean crushed stone, and all of the water from our impervious surfaces, be it our rubber roof, areas of the driveway, will funnel back into these groundwater structures, which will slowly dissipate that water into the ground. The grading of the site is very deliberate. Our final grading is sort of like a soup bowl in a less dramatic fashion. But the idea is that water hits our site and it doesn't run onto any adjacent sites. It's going to come back and fall into 3 catch basins that'll be located very closely designed in that rear parking area. And all those catch basins will go to this groundwater recharge infiltration system. Next slide, please. Construction management plan. I'm not going to spend a lot of time here, but just the idea is that it's a big responsibility building in the city. There's a lot of people, a lot of stuff going on. And so we take that responsibility seriously. I think communication is one thing that this group, I've spoken to a lot of neighbors about, and we're committed to. We might, we've talked about a Facebook group, just a way to say, if we do have a concrete placement on a Tuesday, we'd like our neighbors to be aware that there may be a pump truck setting up at 8 a.m. that day. And if anyone has any other ideas for community outreach and just that type of communication, we're certainly open to suggestions. Next slide, please. Road and control, restriction of deliveries. We don't really have an interest. Our delivery drivers don't want to show up when everyone's trying to get to work as much as you guys don't want us there. So this is something that we try to do wherever we can. And I'm not going to avow that we're perfect, but we do try. And rodent control, we work with a professional group called Waltham Services, who will set up bait stations approximately 6 weeks prior to construction, prior to demolition. And they'll check on those on a bi-monthly basis and refill the baits and make sure that they haven't been destroyed, lost, etc. Next slide, please. Sustainability goals. I'm happy to go into this further. It's somewhat technical, but Stretch Energy Code mandates that we perform a certain degree better than the base building code. So we're committed to that. I think that the stormwater drainage, which we talked about earlier, is another feature of this site. I like to say we're kind of like the Boy Scouts of America. You know, we want to leave this better than we found it. Next slide, please. That sort of concludes the presentation. I appreciate everybody's time and attention, and we're happy to take any feedback or answer any questions.
Awesome. Thanks, Mark. I am going to read the list of the abutters who are eligible to speak out loud. If you're on this list and would like to make a comment, you don't have to. You can still put through the chat if you'd prefer, but raise your hand and I will call on you to unmute. And I apologize if I butcher your name. Kate Bergstrom, Devin Cody, Kathy Schindeldecker, Dan Krupe, Brian Gannon, Marie Pepe Long, Ann Belmonte, Natalia Guterres, Elena Kazlas, Ivan Apicella Fofana, Mary Primo, Laura Baby, Anna Marbin Lorenzo, and James Quackenbush. So if anyone would like to speak, please raise your hand. And while we're waiting for that, I'm just going to go to the chat. There are some questions and comments. One comment, 254 Everett is an example of a sensitive design considering the neighborhood feel and look. This is boxy and very outsized with the small single families. Another comment that they like the parking. Okay. All right, take a break here. Dan, go ahead and unmute.
Thank you. Yeah, so sorry that I've missed, I think this might be the third meeting that we've had on this. So I just purchased 9 RD Street like 2 weeks ago, which is the reason why I didn't attend any of the previous meetings. But day one, I've lived in Jeffreys Point for 6 years on Everett Street. And day one of moving in, I had a flyer kind of left for me, which was about this meeting. So I apologize if things have been discussed in prior meetings. But I guess my concern, or I guess the first thing, I noticed on the first slide where it was going over the variances, it said it was compliant with the 43-foot height. Was that just an error on the PowerPoint, or?
Yeah, so if the columns say allowable height, our height, and then variance required, and you're correct, I noticed the same actually as we were going through it. That will be updated, and you're correct to point that out.
Okay, thank you. And so then I guess my concern being in RD Street, and if I don't know if you're familiar with this area, but RD Street's kind of just behind to, like, if you're at the back of the of 230 Everett Street, it's like to the right. So I guess
you guys have the brick sort of brick townhouse style.
Yeah, exactly.
I know where you guys are.
Yeah. And so I guess I couldn't really like figure out with the renderings, but like how far back this building goes, because I guess that's my biggest concern is that you know, it's a pretty spacious area now, and if it's kind of coming back pretty far into the yard, then I think that that's kind of an issue for me.
Sure. I can actually give you sort of an answer to that. Why don't we keep going? I'll see if I can come back to it. If I'm able to share a screen there, I think I have a drawing that might be helpful.
Okay.
You can email it to board@jeffreyspoint.org, and then Susan can try to put that up. We can't let people share screens, unfortunately.
Gotcha, no problem. Dan, if I put my name and number in the chat, I don't know if that goes to everyone or not, but if you email me, I can email you direct as well.
Yeah,
Um,
that's fine.
Great.
And then two more. And I think one of them I kind of noticed when you're doing the presentation. So the same rendering from the front is also on the back, kind of with like the fourth floor is kind of like set back a bit with that deck. Is that correct?
Chris, are you there?
Yeah, here, that is correct. On the fourth floor on the back, it is set back from the kind of edge of the building, similar to the front.
Okay, cool. And then the only other thing I would just kind of throw in there, I know like every development has to throw in like rodent control, and I know you presented on it. So I lived on 120 Everett Street, and they tore down the building behind us, and they did all the rodent control, and we have had I've probably killed 30 rats in the past like year and a half just from spillover from it. And I know the city has like requirements, but I think it's pretty lax and it's not really useful. So if you could put like any extra effort towards that. And I guess a follow-up point is the building abandoned now?
It is. It's
Yeah,
currently vacant.
Yeah, so I mean, I would, if you can, it would be great if you can, because I feel like once those buildings go abandoned for a few months, the rats, they sense the lack of activity and they just, they
Sure.
but yeah, that's it for me. If you could shoot me your contact info, Mark.
I'm gonna put it in the chat. I have it, and I will put it in the chat to everyone so you have it.
That's great. And Dan, just in response to the rodent activity, what we can do is we can start instead of 6 weeks early. We can try to get them out there, as soon as next month. Just try to have them there for maybe 12 weeks, let those bait stations start to work. And as we monitor them, if we see a lot of activity, we can come back more frequently than every 2 weeks until we start to notice a decline. We get a report as developers from Waltham Services each week, that we don't pay their invoice unless we get the report of what they did and what they saw. So it's good for us to know. And if you notice anything really going on at your place, be in touch with us, and I'm sure it's something that we can try to help with.
Great, thanks. Can I ask one other quick question too? Do you plan on putting in the backyard? Do you plan on putting like a solid fence kind of around the perimeter? Or?
Yeah, we'll have like a 6-foot composite fence, something that doesn't need a lot of maintenance or upkeep, but is architecturally pleasing, and then that'll carry all the way around the perimeter.
Okay. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Okay. So this one's multiple questions. So could you explain exactly how big the setbacks are on each side of the building and how far they are from the lot lines? I noticed you'd listed a range of setbacks for attached dwellings as what is required, but it looked like you only had 1 foot or 1.6 feet on each side from the lot lines. How far will the buildings be from the surrounding homes? Also, I can't tell how big the rear yard will actually be. Is it where the parking and planting area is, or does the building overhang some of the parking area? I'm just going to read the whole thing. You can address all of it. How close is the back of the building to the lot line? I was also wondering what the height is relative to the building next door. The design itself is attractive, but it looks really large compared to the surrounding buildings. It is difficult to tell from the slides how this would fit in or not with the rest of the neighborhood.
I can take those. We have a 28-foot rear yard setback. That setback is measured from the furthest possible point back on the building to the rear lot line. We have 1'6" on either side. Zero, it said like 0/ and then another number if you want. I think it's 3 or 5, but regardless, the 1'6" is on our right and consistent on our left. And we have 7 feet off of the back of the sidewalk, which would constitute our front yard setback. And the second floor does step over part of the parking area, but suffice it to say that 28 feet is measured from the furthest point back on the building.
Okay, great. Do you have any comments on what the height is relative to the buildings next door?
Yeah, we're at 42. We didn't triangulate their roof heights or anything. My estimation is that they're about 35 feet.
how much might street traffic be impaired during construction?
It's primarily a wood frame building. You know, our foundations will be pretty simple. We'd be using helical piles, which are like large screws. And we're not exporting a lot of dirt for that reason. We're not trying to, you know, get rid of 10 feet of just junk organic materials and urban fills and such. We're going to use these sort of alternate foundation approach, which again is are these helical piles. And then we'll have a very simple grade beam system on top of that, and that will carry the weight of the building. So those are things playing in our favor, is that wood frame, not structural steel, no deep excavations. We're not exporting a lot of dirt. And so this project will take approximately a year. I think that's probably the closest I can get to.
Yeah, but will it block, will you have to block any traffic? I think that's what they're asking in terms of like supply trucks coming in. Will streets be closed off? Anything like that?
Understood. No, we'll have to get some street occupancy permits at various times for things like a concrete placement. But even on those days, traffic will be able to pass. There should be almost no activity, but for, you know, a half a day doing utility connections, when we connect our fire suppression line to the street, maybe our sewer lateral, those types of things. Occasionally, we may need a police detail to reroute traffic just on that day. It depends on where in the street those utilities are. If we're fortunate and they're on our half of the street, then everybody can always get through. But I just want to give you the worst case scenario in case they're on the far side of the street.
Okay, and then just a follow-up question is, where will lumber trucks pull up?
Right in front of the building. Yeah.
All right, that is everything in the chat for now. I'll give it a couple more seconds. So if anyone has any questions, or if anyone on the abutter list would like to speak. All right, looks like that's it. Hold on one second. Natalia Gutierrez, you can go ahead and unmute.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, so I don't know. First of all, thank you, Mark, for the presentation. I'm pleased to see that you moved the driveway back to where it is. Appreciate that. But I don't know if it's the right forum, but I wanted to express my discontent with the planning zone, that they keep encouraging developers to come and turn down a perfectly good house and allow them to build a 5-unit building instead of making them replace it with another single family. Any family could have purchased that home to live in it. Like, it's not like the building is falling apart. It's in a perfect building. So that I just wanted to express that I don't understand why we, instead of trying to preserve our neighborhood, we keep trying to turn it down, let them demolish perfectly good buildings, and then reward them, giving them all these variances. I totally agree with the height shouldn't be that high. It doesn't go with the area. I already talked to Mark, and I was very concerned because the building doesn't look like part of the street. It is a beautiful building, but it's not for the street. Our street is a very traditional East Boston street, and it should maintain that feeling. It shouldn't be like we just drop a building in the middle of the street. It looks nothing like your street, but we're new, so we want to do whatever. My other concern, no, I think that's probably it. But yeah, I just wanted to express that. I feel like very disappointed that we keep allowing demolition of nice buildings and letting them build 7 units, 5 units with if it's nothing, instead of trying to preserve our nice, cute neighborhood. That's it. Thanks.
I think there's a higher level. I appreciate your comments, first of all, Natalia, and I enjoyed meeting with you yesterday. I think there's a higher level conversation to be had about, the housing crisis, affordability, and, the city's plan to try to increase housing supply, and what housing supply has done in relation to population growth, and what that single family house would cost if it were to be renovated versus what some of these condos, and offering different types of housing for different types of needs. But again, I think that's beyond my pay grade. And I'm happy to go to the next question, and thank you.
Okay, we only have a few more minutes, so let's move on. Laura, go ahead.
Thank you. Hi, Mark. My husband and I are actually the new owners of 228, so right directly next to the new building. One of my concerns with this is just how we will be able to escalate concerns quickly. We're going to have a newborn baby in August, so if this project is starting in September, I'm going to be watching like a hawk if anything isn't sort of as it's been promised in terms of the noise and when people are coming and going and things like that. I like the idea of the Facebook page a lot to sort of keep people updated, but I know that you've shared your cell phone with us, Mark, but I would love to just understand more if there are plans for really direct conversations with folks where we can get answers quickly if there are issues or things don't feel like they're being held up to what was promised to the neighborhood.
That's reasonable. Laura, we can, I'm not going to I won't be the general contractor on this. We'll make sure that you have a line of communication to us if we need to call them or straight to them. But either way, as these plans develop and our design progresses, we'll have things like construction schedules and logistics plans. And we can sit down as time gets more near and go over those things so you understand what's happening when, and there's no surprises.
Great. Go ahead, Brian.
Yeah, no, I think it's still just too large, and I don't think, we should accept these variances. I just think we're just going too big in a neighborhood of families, and it's just too large. And then also just curious, did this change hands already? Because I thought we had a presentation by a different developer last time.
I'm working, thank you for comments, Brian. I'm working for the development team. I've known you, Brian, for a little while and lived in the community, have built over there. So again, this has not changed hands. I'm not the primary equity owner. I'm just a member of the team. And so if that answers your question as transparently as I can.
So is Richard still representing this, just to clarify?
He's our lawyer. I have no law degree. I don't pretend to. But as for
I was wondering who the owner of the property is, because previously we had a presentation from someone else who was the owner, and now it seems like there's a new team in place. So I'm just curious about that.
Karina's on the line. If you want to say hi, Karina, feel free.
Yeah, no, there hasn't been a change. We just decided to add Mark to the team because I think he is an asset to our development in general, but it's still been the same group.
Absolutely.
Okay, that is it. Thank you, guys. And we will move on to the next project, which is 62 Haynes, presented by Richard Lins. I think I saw Richard here, so you can go ahead.
Nobody has said anything.
Good evening, Rachel and members of the committee. Richard Lins, 245 Summer Street, Boston.
Sorry, I'm muting. Okay. Go ahead. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no problem. So I'm here tonight. This is our first presentation for 62 Haynes Street on behalf of Francesco Chirigatti Spaldi's Lightning Realty LLC. Also with us is Chris Drew from 686 Architects. He's the project architect. So I'm going to run through the presentation, and as is customary, we'll address any questions or comments at the end. So if we could move to the next slide, I'll give a quick overview. So this is, as many probably know, a pre-existing 3-family dwelling. This is considered a non-conforming structure, and it's non-conforming because it does not meet the requirements for the current zoning code for all of the dimensional setbacks. And I'll walk through that a little bit more in detail when I go through the zoning slide. Our proposal involves a change of the legal occupancy from 3 to 4 units. This would involve a complete rehabilitation of the existing structure. It would reprogram the existing space. One thing I do want to point out is that we are not increasing the building footprint or the gross floor area. Normally, when you see a project of this size, as many that I've brought before the neighborhood, we are proposing a vertical addition or some other addition on the building as well. This building has enough volume to it, enough gross floor area that we can reprogram the entire interior of the building without any additions. So the current footprint of what sits in the lot now is what we're proposing to keep. And we're not looking to increase the height of the building at all. I will talk a little bit about the roof decks and the programming on the roof, and we can sort of get into some details on that as well. Because of the extent of the renovations that we're proposing, this would also involve an upgrade to the life safety. So I'm sure as everybody's familiar with the buildings in that area, if they were built, early part of the 20th century, we're looking at buildings that don't have sprinklers or sprinkler systems. We're looking at many of the properties in that area that are not newer construction, that don't have the current life safety as required in the state building code. So we will be upgrading that for the entire building. We are renovating the roof structure that currently exists. There is a head house on the building. We will be modifying that head house to allow for access up to a roof deck. We'll also, for now in the plans, we do propose an additional head house, but I'll talk a little bit more about the details to why we have that. This, upon completion, would be intended for home ownership. There are currently, I believe, 12 bedrooms in the building now. When we're completed with this, we will be reducing it down to a total of 6 bedrooms. So the density of the building itself, even though we are adding a unit, actually reduces dramatically. Next slide, please. So our zoning district, 3F2000 is the designation that the Boston Planning and Development Agency and the Zoning Commission have put forth back in 1993. I'm sure as everybody knows, we are going through Plan East Boston, which will be a rezoning of the entire neighborhood. I'm not sure what the rezoning will look like for this particular neighborhood, but one of the reasons I do include this is because we have an illustration. If you see those blue hash lines down closer to the bottom of the screen, that's the flood zone. So although we're not currently in the flood zone, we're relatively close. And that's one of the reasons why we're proposing the changes that we're proposing in this building. They all pretty much deal with the existing floor space, not any additional space. We're not proposing any additional space in the basement. Next slide, please. So a bird's eye view, bottom of the screen, you can see the Piers Park Phase 1, as well as the location of where Phase 2 will be, the intersection of Marginal Street, as well as where Haynes turns. And you can see our building in relationship to the surrounding properties. Next slide, please. Just another bird's eye view. This is helpful if we can, I don't know if we're able to zoom in on the screen, but we can see the head house that does exist on the right side of the building. I think I also have a different photo as well. Next slide, please. Looking back towards the harbor, we can see the head house behind the red arrow. Next slide, please. So the existing conditions now, as you come around Haynes, you can see the existing building. This is a relatively larger triple decker, and that's one of the reasons why we're able to make the modifications that we're proposing and to make reasonable sized units based upon the program that we've come up with. Next slide, please. Just a corner view, I'm sure as everybody recalls, there was a project that was proposed for this site that has been approved by the Boston Zoning Board of Appeal. It's currently going through BPD design review, so this will ultimately be developed. The building we're looking at off in the background is the building that we're talking about the renovations to. Next slide, please. So this is the rendering at this time. We are showing the 2 head houses and illustrating those for purposes of submissions for compliance with the building code. Based upon the height of our building, and we do have the existing head house already, by us proposing an additional roof deck, we are proposing to be compliant with the building code and have access through a head house. The zoning board is not particularly fond of head houses or additional head houses. We do show this for purposes of the filings that we've submitted to the Inspectional Service Department. However, my guess is we will be eliminating one of those head houses and simply modifying and making the other head house smaller. But we are illustrating for purpose of transparency because what we file with the Inspectional Service Department has to be building code compliant. So we are showing the plan. However, the modification is likely to occur where that head house off to the left side of the building is likely to be eliminated. Next slide, please. So by way of zoning summary, we are proposing this as a 4-family. 3-family is the maximum allowed on one lot. That is the current use. The change from a 3 to a 4 would require a variance for the additional unit. There really is no impact with respect to lot size, lot width, side yard, front yard, rear yard, floor area ratio, or maximum height. As I mentioned, we already are working within the existing framework of the building, so we're not changing the floor area ratio. Right now, it is already at 2.24, which is in excess of the 1.0 that's allowed in the district. But because we're not adding any floor space, as I said, we're not proposing any addition or any vertical addition, we don't change that FAR. We're working within the confines of that. If anything, by creating some common space in the area, we're actually reducing the size of the actual livable area, but it is still counted towards gross floor area. We don't change anything with respect to our setbacks, front, rear, or side, even though those are non-conforming. By not adding any addition to the building, we don't require any relief for that. Currently, there is a very, very small open space condition on the property. By us proposing to add roof decks, we would be technically adding usable open space that's recognized under the code. However, in the 3F 2000 district, roof decks are not specifically identified for usable open space. So we will request a variance for open space for that additional unit that we're proposing. However, we believe that the amount of space that we're creating on the roof decks would be sufficient. Our parking, currently there is no parking associated with the building, and therefore there is no parking requirement, I should say, for the existing 3-family. The zoning code says that you're only required to add 1 parking space for the additional unit you're proposing, and therefore we'd request the variance for the 1 space. Next slide, please. Just our site plan, we can come back to that for reference, but just showing you the existing conditions and the setbacks that exist in the building currently. Next slide, please. And these are just our existing conditions plans of the basement and first floor. Next slide. And the second and third level as well. Next slide. And the existing head house as shown in the illustration, just showing the location of the head house. Next slide. Existing elevations showing the height up to the top of the existing head house. Next slide. And just a different view from the other angles. Next slide. So this is the elevation in comparison. So on the left side, you do have the existing condition. On the right, you show the new condition. So as you can see, the existing head house would be modified to actually reduce the bulk of that. We are, again, showing for purposes of compliance with the building code, the additional head house. But as I said, I'm fairly certain in the final analysis that is going to be eliminated because the zoning board would not approve that anyhow. So it really just going to involve a modification of the existing head house. Next slide, please. So showing our basement plan, we're not adding, as I said, no livable space in the lower level. That's the current condition now. That will be strictly for storage and mechanical equipment. When you get up to the first level, we are proposing these as, we're calling them 1-bedrooms. They're technically 2 studios at the first level. And the reason we're proposing studios in this particular case, it does create an affordable option. When we are proposing condominiums, you know, everything that does go on the market is based on square footage. These are relatively smaller units. And based upon that, these would be at a likely more affordable price point than something that's in the 800-900 square foot range. Next slide, please. As we go up to the second level, we're actually making both unit 3 and unit 4 bi-level. So you would enter on the second level, have an internal stairwell up to the third level, and those would be 2-level units each. So they sort of mirror each other, both left and right. And as I said previously, we do have a much larger bedroom count in the building currently, which would be reduced down to 6 bedrooms. Next slide, please. And just showing our layouts for our roof deck. So we do see the existing head house location on the right side, and then our proposed on the left side. We would continue to still have 2 roof decks on the roof. One would have to be accessed via hatch, and the other would be accessed via the head house. That would be modified. Next slide, please. And just showing our elevations from different angles. Next slide. And again, the elevation showing the location and proximity of the head houses with the roof decks. Next slide. So we are presenting tonight. This is our initial presentation. We anticipate an abutters meeting at some time in the very near future. I anticipate we probably will see a planning and zoning follow-up, and then we will proceed hopefully to a JPNA voting meeting at some point in the future. My guess is we would be before the Board of Appeals sometime this summer. Assuming we get our approval, the permit would issue probably by the fall with design review, and construction on this would take about 6 months to complete. I believe that's the last slide. I don't know. Yep, perfect. So happy to answer any questions or address any comments.
Great. I am going to read the list of abutters who are eligible to speak. We have Frank Cinque, Jay Woodstock, Patty D'Amore, Mary Grace Gravalis Vesta, and Michael Dwyer. So if any of you would like to speak, feel free to raise your hand. I will start with the chat. Okay. So for neighbors, can you please clarify what's meant by home ownership as the intention? Does that mean owner occupancy?
Home ownership is condo, so these would be individual condominium units that would be sold. This is not intended. The difference being a rental building where it's the entire building is owned, and then the units are rented out individually.
Jay, I'm going to let you speak in 1 second. I just want to read this comment. I used to live at 116 Marginal as a tenant of Jay Woodstock. An addition of a roof deck on this building will be an echo chamber for the entire back of the homes between Webster and Marginal. Okay, go ahead, Jay. Can unmute?
Hi, my name's Jay Woodstock. I live at 116 Marginal Street, and I'm really disappointed in this presentation. The surrounding buildings will be like we're living in a fishbowl with this roof deck. It's just, I'm just really so disappointed. You know, I can't even articulate it. So there'll be privacy issues. There'll be loss of light for the neighbors. There should be a shadow study shown. And what about the noise? Roof decks up there. There are going to be lots of people up there. There's going to be noise. It's just not right. That's all I've got to say. I oppose this.
Thank you. Rachel, do you want me to respond, or do you want me to wait till you go through?
Yeah, let's just go through everything and then you can respond. Thank you. How much modification will you be doing to the existing head house? Another question.
As I showed in the illustration, we would be, right now it's pretty much a square box. We would be creating that, sort of sloped roof on it, which would actually allow for the stairwell to come up. So not a significant amount of modification in the sense that we wouldn't be certainly making it bigger. It would be working within its existing footprint, but reducing it down from a, I guess, for lack of a better term, a cube into more of a triangular design with the stairwell.
Okay. Would the project consider having both roof decks accessed via hatches as opposed to the head houses?
We could, so the board generally is okay with existing head houses being modified. They will put that through a design review process. So, things like materials and color and what the design of that will actually look like, gets before the BPDA as part of the conversation. And the board generally doesn't have an issue with existing head houses. It's new head houses that they have somewhat of a problem with. But yes, we can absolutely look at that as an option. Perhaps that brings some of the bulk of the building down. And if that's a request by neighbors, then that's something we certainly can consider.
Okay. And just to confirm, you have not had your abutters meeting with through ONS yet, correct?
No, we have not held that yet, no.
Okay. Another comment. Thank you for working within the existing footprint of the building. It looks really nice. The dual head houses are a little obnoxious, so I'm glad to hear you would consider modifying that.
Yeah, we'll take a close look at that before our next planning and zoning.
Okay. I'll give it another minute or two, but as of now, that is all I have. All right, I think that is it. So, do you
Rachel,
want to
may
say
I-
anything else?
Yeah, I just wanted to respond to Jay, and I certainly respect Jay's concern over, creating the fishbowl. The roof decks, and I know Francesco's going to be a neighbor to this building. I mean, he's going to live at the adjoining site where the new project is being proposed. He's obviously going to share those concerns as well. So if you look at the size of our roof decks, I know those are on your website. These are very modest. These are not, enormously large roof decks. There would be very limited amount of people that, actually could fit up there. So I don't expect these to be, the large party decks that people are concerned with elsewhere in the city. These might even accommodate perhaps two chairs, two or three chairs at most. People enjoying their outdoor space is something that, just has to be understood as being part of living in the city, whether it's on your roof, in your backyard, in your back porch, wherever that might be. So in this case, the roof deck that we're proposing is not intended to be something that creates issues for the neighborhood. It's going to be no different than, rear decks, rear yards, or what have you, for people who, just want to have a little bit more outdoor space. The roof deck themselves are within the height limit. So eliminating the head houses, roof decks can be as of right, especially if the height of the building, permits that. So I don't want to get too far into the argument over the roof decks. We certainly could look at the head houses themselves, and if that's an accommodation that the neighborhood would like to see, I'm all for recommending that to the client to say that these are things that should be considered in moving forward. So happy to look at that.
And I have a quick question. So I know you said that, you're applying with the two head houses and that you anticipate that one will be removed. Will that be removed before you go to the ZBA? So we will be voting on the project that has it removed, correct?
Yeah, maybe I give you a clear answer on how we approach this. So because we file with ISD a fully building code compliant set of plans, that's what we're showing the neighborhood. And I just feel, in the interest of transparency, I wouldn't want to show you a building that didn't have what we had on the plan submitted to ISD. Somebody could go and look at those plans and say, that's not what you submitted to ISD. So we're showing you what we submitted to ISD. When we go through the process, before we get to the zoning board hearing, we typically then will change that plan out. We'll file that with ISD. That will trigger either a building code violation or some other review. But we've at least vetted it with the community, and we've explained to the community what our process is. So that's why we show it always first as being there. And then if we remove it, we explain why we're removing it. But I'm fairly confident that proposed new head house will not be included. We will explore removing the other head house as part of the conversation.
Great. Okay. All right. I think that is it. Thank you very much. Thanks to everyone for attending. And go have a great evening and watch the Celtics.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Thank you, everybody.
Take care.